Hi everyone, and welcome to the Imagining a New We video blog with me, Dr. Samantha Cutrara, a video series designed to help teachers and other history educators teach history in ways that are more transformative, meaningful, and inclusive for their students. And teachers already do such transformative work. You know that because you're in the classroom and you can see the impact that you're making on students' lives. But more than that, teachers stand up for what they believe in, and they make action to say that we need better conditions in our classrooms. And I am looking at you, Ontario teachers, in particular. This is February of 2020, and we are in week 5, I believe, of strike action here in Ontario. There has been rotating strikes for the last few weeks. Today and yesterday, it's been some of the snowiest, coldest days in, definitely for 2020, but for this winter. And they are out with pickets, and they are out saying that cuts hurt kids, which they do, and we all know that. And so thank you so much for standing up, not just for the students in your classroom, but for students and generations to come that you know are going to be affected by the Ford government in Ontario making such drastic and really inhumane cuts to education. So thank you so much for that action. What I want to talk about today is related directly to that action, which is how do we talk about things like labor unrest and unions and strikes in our classrooms, especially elementary classrooms. I know a lot of teachers don't want to bring politics into the classroom, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective, but I also think that we model. Oh, you can see a cat. You can see a cat. That's a dollhouse where their food is. You know, we all make our choices. We don't want to bring politics into our classroom, and I get that, but I also think that we model so much of what it means to be a citizen, what it means to be an adult, what it means to be a human when we are standing in front of a classroom with children in front of us. And to be able to identify like what elementary teachers are doing and how it relates to a longer history, and how them getting a day out of school, for example, is going to make change in the wider world, I think is important to be able to introduce to your students. So how can we do that? Well, we can use media. We can use picture books. We can use graphic novels. We can even use movies. Now, I'm in Toronto, and I have access to the Toronto Public Library, a very expansive library, and I did a search to see what books about labor, about unions, about strikes are available at the Toronto Public Library for elementary school students. And I found some really, really great things, and I found some things that, you know, weren't amazing. So let me show you what I found. I have a lot of stuff here that you can't see, but you're going to see it all at once. So the first thing that I found are kind of books that you would expect. This book, Factory Girl, which, and some of these are American, I should say. A lot of these are American, actually. So just be aware of that, although I don't really think that matters too much when you're talking about strike and political action. So anyway, so one is called Factory Girl. This one reads very much like, you know, a non-fiction information book, pre-Wikipedia type of information. There's this book too, it's a little bit older, called Kids on Strike, and this focuses on and same image as the Factory Girl image, and this focuses specifically on children labor in the 19th and 20th century and the strike actions related to that. You can see this is very text heavy, so it's really more of a research book. It's certainly not a story book. And then there's also something like this, which is a fiction book called 44 Hours or Strike. Also very text heavy, but it's a fictionalized version of strikes related to 19th and 20th century labor actions. So those are some good books. Like, they are research books. They're not, you know, They aren't the most exciting books that you can bring into your classroom to read at story time, but they are certainly great books for research. But there are some really great storybooks that you could use. So something like The Bobbin Girl, which is again American, or Brave Girl. These, another American book. They also talk about 19th and 20th century labor issues and strike issues. You can see strike right at the cover right here, and they focus on textile workers, specifically children. I really like this book because of the images and the real emphasis on action and discussion. This book here, Bobbin Girl, I feel like the graphics of it are a little bit more conservative. I mean, maybe not this picture. There's a woman that just fainted there, but I don't feel like the images quite have the same kind of pop in terms of impact on labor and striking, but you might find that this resonates really well. Something here which is a little bit more contemporary, Hero to Migrant Workers. This is another American book. This is short and sweet. It doesn't really focus on strike action so much, but it does focus on, it's not a great page, but it does focus on action and collective action and workers' rights, which is interesting because it doesn't, but the text is very minimal, which is good for story time. Because it doesn't focus on strike so much, you'll have to make those links a little bit more yourself, which you might be into doing, so that's cool. My favorite books, though, are the books, two books, Let the Children March and Memphis, Martin and the Mountain Strike, the sanitation strike of 1968. You know, okay, I'm just going to be honest. American children's books that are related to history are just better than Canadian books, and you can prove me wrong. I would love it if you prove me wrong, and not prove me wrong like this, but really prove me wrong like this. If you can give me some examples and let me know I'm wrong, please bring them on. But when I am looking for children's books related to history, both nonfiction and fiction, the ones that I find are the most interesting and impactful and most recently published are American histories. And so this Memphis, Martin and the Mountaintop about the sanitation strike, can you, even with these graphics, I mean, have you seen anything so beautiful? This really does connect with Martin Luther King, and it is told from a young girl's point of view whose father was part of the sanitation strike. The images don't, the images are beautiful. The images aren't really about striking. It does seem like there's a lot of text, but it is great, and it's lyrical, and it's really, really powerful. So I would highly recommend this. And at any point in your classroom, maybe even if you aren't bringing this in to talk about strikes, but this one is just beautiful. And so is this one, Let the Children March. This is about children that were part of the civil rights movement, that were also marching. And this one is really, really fantastic because, again, it's a focus on Martin Luther King. I mean, with these graphics, I can't. I should do a whole video about American children's books and my love for the illustrations, especially related to Black history and women's history, but the whole video would be me just amazing, right? Amazing, right? And I don't know how entertaining that would be. Actually, you might find it very entertaining. I might not. So, but this one is very much about you see young people striking, and I think that bringing a book like this, again, the text isn't really that much. You can make that you can make that stretch between what you're doing out on the streets in front of your classrooms now and how this is a longer legacy of workers fighting for what's right. And I think that's important for us to highlight for our students. There are also some really great graphic novels for older students, maybe. Grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. This one here is from the Atkinson Foundation, A Share in the Honor, and it is about Joseph Atkinson himself. I was given this copy by the Atkinson Foundation. It was illustrated by Joanna Dawson, who has done some really great, beautiful work, and I really love this piece, but I don't know how available it is. This is from my own personal collection. It's not from the library, but if you contact the Atkinson Foundation, they might be happy to share their resources with you. Then there is also the Graphic History Collective. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they do such amazing and fantastic work. And if you liked to bring in graphic novels to your classroom, definitely check out their work. I became familiar with their work because historians that I work with them as well. So they are well researched and they have some really great things. So this is the graphic history of the Winnipeg General Strike, 1919. You can see it's a really powerful illustration style. And I had a page I want to show you. What I really like about, there we go. What I really like about some of these children's books and graphic novels is when they bring in or when they show things that look like primary sources, because I think what that does is normalize the primary sources for your students, so when you bring in a document or a photograph, they can remember how it's part of the storytelling of some of the other stories that they have read. Yeah, this one is great. This one is great. I would highly recommend bringing this in, but I mean, it's not for like little kids. It's a graphic novel, although the text isn't too heavy. And then this one is also fantastic. Ginger Goodwin, a worker's friend. This is just a fantastic book. It is so powerful in the way that the graphics and the illustrations are used. There isn't a lot of text, but the way that the images work is that they tell such strong stories. Yeah, right? It's really cool. So I've done some work with graphic novels, and I found that there's like two styles of graphic novels related to teaching history. One is like traditional stories, but just like told in a comic book format, and then the other are books like these ones that are really interested in telling new stories because of the graphics. And the Graphic History Collective has done such an amazing job. So definitely check these out as well. I just found a couple other books. One was Labor Day. This is a very short book, but it does highlight the history of Labor Day to labor, which is important. And from this book, I learned, and I also did some web searching, that Labor Day started in Toronto. That's cool. How do I not know this? Do you know this? Is this something that people know that I just don't? Anyway, so that's super cool. A lot of the stuff, if you look for who started Labor Day, you actually get American results, but if you look at that research, the Canadian Encyclopedia and this book say that Labor Day started in 1872, and then a lot of things that you find online saying that it started in America are in the 1880s. So we won, I guess. Anyway, that's really cool. If I'm wrong, please let me know. This is a cool book. It does link with the history of labor, but it also links with like hot dog eating and, you know, the fact that we have a day off, and that's just a nice time in the summer to relax. It is a good way to identify this longer history of labor to your little kids, even if it doesn't go too deep. And then this book is also really cool. It's called Paychecks, Picket Lines. Paychecks and Picket Lines. I'm just trying to, there we go. There's a little bit less glare. So Paychecks and Picket Lines, all about unions in Canada. This is actually a really cool book. It has a lot of really interesting things like where the word scab comes from, or what our history of unions look like. You'll notice that this book is pretty wordy, so it is another research book. What do unions do? But you also might notice that it looks pretty dated. If I was to guess the publication date, I would say 1985. It's coming apart because probably no one has taken this book out in a while, so that's cool. Yeah, it looks and feels like it was made in the 80s, 87, and the author was born in 1930. But that doesn't mean it doesn't actually have some really great learning for your students. If you take a look at the chapters, it is, there we go, no glare. What is a union? How do unions work? What do they do? The strike and the future, etc. So you might actually want to get this book yourself. I will return it to the library if you're in Toronto, so you can take it out yourself and help wanted ads of 2010, like they're imagining that. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's a little different than the Imagining a New We, I think, that I came up with. Robot repair person, undersea tourist guide, leisure consultant, bioengineer. Oh, that's actually true. Anyway, sorry, I digress. You might want to take this book out of the library and get some information that might be able to, that you could bring into your lessons. And finally, if these books aren't available to you, you can also watch a movie like the Newsies movie that came out in the 1990s with, I think the late 1990s rather than the early 2000s. Yeah, late 1990s with haughty young Christian Bale. Newsies also became a musical, like a stage musical, and that is also available, that's fairly available to watch as well if you have some musical theater kids in your class that might like a stage presence. That's all about labor, and even though I watched it a lot as a kid, I may have been distracted by young, hot Christian Bale singing. Even though I watched it a lot as a kid, I didn't actually realize it had to do with labor issues until I was an adult. But what it did actually was normalize things like labor issues for me. So when I started to learn about different issues with child labor, in my head it was like, oh, I already kind of know about this. Oh yeah, they were kind of exploited. So it's a cool thing to bring into your class just to, again, demonstrate that long history of the strike and labor actions that you are taking right now, which is amazing. So I'm going to end this video. If you click the link below, you'll see citations to all the books that I've talked about today, as well as links to the Toronto Public Library catalog, if that is useful for you. Please let me know if there are other books, other movies, other media that we should have on our list of how to talk about this with our students or our children. If you're a parent and you're also looking for ways to bring in a conversation like this at home, thank you again for standing up for such drastic cuts. And you're not alone. Ontario teachers, the teachers all over Canada and North America and the world support the work that you do. So thank you so much. Click the link below for more information. Subscribe if that's your thing, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.